Welcome to Millennial 735. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
And on today's episode, we're going to be discussing three big pop culture stories. We're going to talk about Shang-Chi and many other movies being shut out of China. Then we'll discuss reliving major events through pop culture. And towards the end, we're going to chat with someone who works at an agency who handles celebrity social media accounts. And then we're going to talk about parasocial relationships, because these have been hot gossip on Twitter lately. But first, we have some newsy updates.
Yeah, so we heard in the last few days that President Biden has announced that all businesses with 100 plus employees must require vaccinations or weekly negative COVID tests.
Oh, I love it.
I'm not going to lie, I was super excited when I saw this. And I was like, fuck you. Like, that was my response. I was like, fuck yeah. And I'm like looking at all the employers, and I'm just like, okay, seeing how people are responding to this tells me what I need to know should I ever find myself in the position to be looking for work. Right?
So you're going to go somewhere with more than 100 employees?
Well, I currently work somewhere with more than 100 employees.
But I mean, like, if you're looking at other opportunities.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Also, I would just be looking for work from home jobs, honestly. I feel like this is a great opportunity for a lot of businesses if they don't want to wade into this debate, because there is a lot of debate about it. There's questions about, does the president have the authority to issue this kind of mandate? There are obviously Republican governors pushing back on this. And I think a great response from businesses would just be to say, you know what? If you don't want to be vaccinated, you can just work from home.
Mm-hmm. Or get tested weekly.
Or just get tested. Waste your time getting tested every week.
But Biden also struck a kind of aggravated tone when he spoke about this. Yes. And he announced these new guidelines. That was awesome. He said, we're tired of waiting for you. It's time to hop on the vaccine train. So get with us or deal with testing. Yeah,
seriously, the rest of us have been doing our part. And it's getting really frustrating to see us take this one step forward, two steps back approach towards the pandemic. We're ready for it to be over.
You know who is not doing their part, though they argue that they are? Nicki Minaj. Some late breaking news on Monday. Nicki Minaj went on Twitter and she said, the reason I'm not at the Met Gala is because they're requiring that everybody be vaccinated. And she said, I'm not vaccinated yet because I'm still doing my research about the vaccines.
Oh, please.
And she did say everybody should wear a mask. But it's like, Nicki, wait a second. You're a rapper. You're a celebrity. You don't need to do research. You can trust doctors and scientists and the FDA. It's safe to get the vaccine at this point. She's doing her research. What research is she doing?
Yeah.
Just on YouTube. And of course, the backlash was swift.
Good
indeed. But then 20 minutes later, it gets weirder. Nicki tweets, my cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen. His friend was weeks away from getting married. Now the girl called off the wedding. So just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision and not bullied. Okay, I have a lot of questions.
Wasn't there actually a study that said that contracting COVID could fuck with your penis or something?
Yeah, lose your ability to be fertile, I think.
Exactly. Or something like that. Erectile dysfunction, was it? It was something that would have been, triggering to most men.
A lot of guys would not like. Right, exactly. But okay, here's my other question about this tweet and the huge testicles. Why is the wedding called off over somebody's swollen testicles? I don't get it. Oh, Laura, we just lost Laura at Laura's house.
She was so pissed. She just said, I gotta leave.
She was having internet
problems.
problems.
Look at what you did, Nicki Minaj. You lost us our third host.
Pam, what's going on with Nicki? Has she been anti-science before?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm mostly just disappointed because she's not a small celebrity.
Yeah.
She's really huge and she has a huge platform, and it just is so disappointing whenever you see people with her reach use it for not good reasons. She could have just easily kept that to herself. There was no reason why she needed to
Right.
To say that. She could have gave any other BS reason for why she wasn't at the Met Gala tonight.
Just be like, I wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
And here's the other problem. It's people like her that are the reason hospitals are reaching capacity. ICU wards are reaching capacity because so many people are ending up hospitalized due to COVID. And all these people, the large majority of these people are not vaccinated. So it's people like Nikki who are dragging their ass, doing their YouTube research and not getting vaccinated. And then the ICUs get all filled up. And then people, these poor people, we keep hearing these stories who need an ICU bed because of COVID or otherwise, they can't get a bed right now. And it's all because of these people who aren't getting vaccinated. It's sickening. Anyway, the internet, like I said, the reaction was swift, and I'm just living for all the tweets about her right now and this story about the swollen testicles. All right, so we did lose Laura. She's trying to get her internet back, but we'll move on here in the interest of time. Another update, the U.S. Department of Justice is suing Texas over its restrictive abortion law. That's good news. Nice to see the Biden administration trying to do something there. And jumping back again to pop culture, Britney Spears' father asked the judge to begin considering his removal from the conservatorship. That's a very big deal. We've come a long way in the past year, and now he's willing and able to let go, which is good. Days later, Britney got engaged to longtime boyfriend Sam Asghari. They've been together since 2016. Asghari.
I know that this was triggering to a lot of people. They've been together for a really long time. I know that she said in her testimony that she wanted to get married so badly, but that the conservatorship wouldn't allow it.
Mm-hmm.
If he stuck through all of that, then he must be in it for the long haul, right? I don't know. What did you think?
You would think so. Yeah. I mean, I have every reason to think it's a legitimate relationship. I don't think their love isn't real or anything like that. The timing is interesting. I'm surprised they maybe couldn't have waited. Also, they did this over 9/11 weekend. I was like, maybe could you just have waited another week? It was funny. So Britney makes the announcement on her Instagram, and then Octavia Spencer, she offered no congratulations. She just went in the comments and said, get a prenup.
Straight to the point. I appreciate that.
Okay, Laura's back.
Woo!
And then Pam, there's a big vote coming up in California, right?
Yes, there is a gubernatorial recall election going on right now. We're recording on Monday, September 13th. The election day is tomorrow, September 14th. So if you live in California, everybody should have gotten a vote by mail ballot. Please, please, please fill that out and make sure that your voice is heard because it's very important.
And you would encourage people to vote no on this recall, Pam,
I
is
would.
that correct?
I wasn't sure if it was okay to mention how I would be voting on this show, but yes.
Listen, I mean, do you remember last year where we were like...
Oh, that's true. We did endorse an official candidate, didn't we?
We did.
Okay, yeah. I would vote no on the recall. I'm very much for Gavin Newsom staying in office, and I strongly encourage you to do that as well because this election is very much bullshit. So, do whatever you want, I guess, but that would be my advice to California voters.
And we'll talk about why it's bullshit next week.
Yeah. We've been putting it off for a couple of weeks, but we figured it would be smartest to just wait until the election happens, and then we can just give you guys a full rundown and talk a little bit more about that after it occurs.
Yeah. I mean, long story short, though, isn't a California recall the reason we ended up with the governor back in 2003?
It is indeed.
So, I mean, just think about that. Also think about Texas. This was a point. So I have a very complicated relationship or feelings towards Bill Maher at this point because he frustrates me at this point in time. I just, that could be a whole other discussion, like the fall of Bill Maher. But he did say one thing this last week that resonated with me, which was Californians, look at Texas. That's what's happening in a state with a Republican governor. Do you want that?
Yeah.
No.
I have to agree with you, Laura. Maybe I need to start texting you during Bill Maher because I used to love him. It was actually you that got me into Bill Maher, and I've been a loyal viewer ever since. We're talking 7-8 years now. But over time, he's just gotten grumpier, and I'm disagreeing with more and more of what he has to say.
Same.
And, it's okay to not agree with everything, but he's a little off course, I think, more than he has been in recent years.
Well, he's just trying to be controversial at this point. He's trying to shock people. He's trying to speak in what I would call bumper sticker lingo. Like it's all what sounds snappy, but maybe what isn't super substantive. So that's my biggest gripe with him. Didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, not as funny either anymore, I don't think.
I agree.
Anyway, so let's turn back to pop culture, and actually the rest of this episode is really going to be pop culture focused, though this one is actually a little political as well.
Yeah, so last week Laura and I gave our spoiler-free review of Shang-Chi, which is the latest Marvel movie to hit the big screen. It's only released in theaters right now until the exclusivity window is done with. But something really interesting about this movie is that it doesn't yet have a release date in China, which is a huge market for Hollywood. And it might not actually ever get a release date over there, which is a huge blow for Disney and also for Marvel as well, because, they really rely on box office numbers out there in order to make more money. So this headline actually started circulating late last week, and a new report from Deadline was trying to give some context to this. And the report basically said that what might actually be preventing the movie from getting a release date at all is that there were some comments made by the movie star, Simu Liu, who recently, these comments were kind of old, but they recently resurfaced on this social media site out in China called Weibo. Yeah, that's the name.
It's a big site. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of I think it's the biggest because they're not really allowed to have most of the ones that we have. The government prohibits it. So in this interview, which he did with the CBC, Simu said that the country was a third world country and also claimed that the people there were dying of starvation. He was actually born in China before his parents immigrated to Canada, but he was talking specifically about what his parents had told him about what life was like before he could, remember it himself. And the interview started making the rounds on Weibo. And so Chinese audiences are not happy, but obviously China and the government in China is also not happy. But that's only part of the story because Marvel was already sort of facing an uphill battle over there. Audiences were really unenthused about this movie getting made in general, especially given the comics' racist history. In the comics, Shang-Chi's father is a character named Fu Manchu, which is also the name of the caricature of Asians that you see commonly portrayed in any kind of racist history that depicts them as well. And the comics themselves were also super racist when they came out. So people were already weary about that. Kevin Feige, who is the Marvel head, was trying to do a lot of damage control. And, that character does not show up at all in the movie. They've completely erased him. But, obviously audiences are still weary because it's Hollywood. And Hollywood is just now kind of starting to rectify the fact that they have really stifled minority voices. But the point still stands that, these resurfaced comments actually might be the thing that doesn't get the movie released out there at all. So it's pretty interesting from that standpoint, especially because, we're always looking at it from our perspective over here in North America, and everybody's just so excited that there's an Asian American superhero on screen, or an Asian superhero on screen because he's Canadian. Have you guys heard about this at all? Because I didn't realize that they were having so much trouble with it until I saw
heard
these
a little
headlines.
bit about it. I'm actually a little surprised that Disney can't figure out how to convince China. I just feel like they would have made inroads at this point since so much money is on the line with getting every film released in China. Obviously, the comments were inappropriate to make. It does seem like severe overreach to be like, these comments, you shouldn't have said them, so we're not showing the film just on that alone.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if a non-American star made some disparaging comments about the United States. And if the US as a country was like, we will not show your movie here, it's just a very different approach that I don't think any of us have any real frame of reference for. That said, I don't want to diminish anyone's thoughts or feelings. I mean, it's an immensely complex subject, and I would think that someone who was born there and whose family immigrated to another country in search of what they believe to be a better life, I have to imagine that person is going to have a certain interpretation about their country of origin and why their family left. And there's probably validity to those comments. At the same time, when you have any level of influence, you have to watch what you say, because stuff like this can come back to bite you. So it's one of these things where I don't necessarily fault someone for speaking freely about their experience, but it's also not helpful if you're trying to be somebody who's in the limelight to be quite that frank about an entire country, because one person's comment does not capture the entire experience of a nation full of people, right?
Right.
So I don't know what the right thing for Disney to do here is.
Yeah, it is really hard. And it's kind of funny because it looks like they're also having a similar issue with getting a release date for Marvel's Eternals, which is the next MCU movie that's coming out. That's obviously directed by Oscar winner Chloe Zhao, and she won the Oscar for Nomadland, which I know we talked about here on this show. Incredible film, but it was actually essentially shunned by China and the media out there because of comments that she had made about her native country. She was born out in China, and she said some things that they didn't like. Specifically, she called the country a place where there are lies everywhere. And that's the reason why they decided that they were just essentially going to erase Nomadland from existence on their social sites. I think that the larger context here is just to kind of take this into consideration as well, because, you know, we're seeing time and time again, these are just like two examples, but of Hollywood kind of bending to the will of creating content that will potentially get the green light out in China to get screened, which is not that big of a deal, but it is when you think about how pop culture has the ability to fuel conversation and narrative. And it's just kind of funny because I think Hollywood would like people to believe that they're really edgy and, you know, they're all about amplifying voices of creatives and stuff. But all of that really gets stifled when you think about the fact that, you know, they're walking a fine line here to make sure that they can appeal to a mass market in an effort to get their money back, basically.
Yeah.
It's just like we've spoken about Disney avoiding putting gay characters in their movies because they know some of these countries will want to cut that material out, and it has been cut out. Even a little background kiss in the latest Star Wars movie got cut out. I can't remember which country it was, but you know, some of these countries are really adamant about what they show their citizens, and it's disturbing. It's frustrating that the studios just can't be like, well, we're gonna make this movie really gay. We're gonna make Buzz and Woody gay, and we don't care if a country has a problem with it. Of course, they're going to decide not to do that because there's too much money on the line. So they have to no homo everything.
Yeah. And Taylor in our Discord is also pointing out that John Boyega was made smaller on the Chinese poster of The Force Awakens. That was a big controversy too. So it's not just gay characters or actors who are critical of the Chinese government who are being censored. It can also be racism, sexism, all the isms. So it's just, it's an immensely complicated thing. And I thought, Pam, you brought up a really good point about sort of like the Western centric view of diversity and representation, and how maybe our views of what resonates with us as a Western culture about people getting representation may not resonate with other cultures that represent the countries of origin of the groups that are being represented, right? Like perhaps the representation of an American Asian character or a North American Asian character isn't going to land very well with someone living in China.
Right.
Also, just the gay kiss in the latest Star Wars movie was removed in Singapore.
We'll be back to the show in just a moment, but first, I'd like to take a quick minute to tell you about our first sponsor this week, Way. It always feels good to hit the reset button and get a fresh start by decluttering your mailbox or purging your closet. And if your hair's a bit overdue for the same treatment, it's time for the clarifying detox shampoo from Way. I've really been hitting my dry shampoo hard lately to buy myself some time between washes, but even on the roughest of hair days, I know Way has my back. As someone with color-treated hair, I know our hair can take a lot of experimentation that leaves it craving a much-needed reset. I am obsessed with Way's clarifying detox shampoo for so many reasons. The amazing Melrose Place scent, how light and clean it makes my hair feel, and how it strips away oil and dirt from my hair without stripping moisture. A combination of apple cider vinegar and keratin exfoliates and balances your scalp, plus smooths frizz and creates a lustrous shine. And if you love the clarifying detox shampoo, you should check out Way's full collection of hair care, body, and fragrance products, all cruelty, sulfate, and paraben free. When you're ready to undo some damage, hit the reset button with the Way Detox Shampoo. Go to theouai.com and use code MILL to get 15% off your entire purchase. That's theway.com, theouai.com, code MILL for 15% off today. All right, well, the last week has brought us some new hot television that I know all three of us on this panel were excited for. I know some of our listeners were excited for. It's Impeachment: American Crime Story, following the Bill Clinton-Monica Lewinsky scandal from the 1990s, which ultimately led to President Bill Clinton being impeached.
That's right. Big new show on FX. Very excited about it.
I see you have your Clive Owen impersonation of Bill Clinton up.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So I thought that this would be a really interesting topic for us to chat about because we're seeing more and more media like this that is dramatizing real events that happened during our lifetimes. So we're getting to relive things that we actually lived through the medium of movies and television. And I thought it would be interesting for us to review the episode, but also dig into what it's like to see something that we remember very well portrayed through this lens. So I thought we could first just talk about our first impressions of episode 1, which is called Exiles. And maybe we can start with talking about how much of the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal do we remember?
I remember only knowing that it was going on. I knew no details at the time. This started in the late 90s when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. So I wasn't following it. And I grew up in a household where my dad in particular was really shielding me from the real world. I mean, we're talking about the dad who fast forwarded through the topless scene in Titanic because God forbid we saw some titties. It's just, it was to that level of shielding. So I only heard of it, but I never watched it on TV or my family never spoke about it.
Yeah, I remember hearing the word impeachment a lot. So I knew I had a vague recollection or idea of the fact that the president was on trial. I remember that I did not have sexual relations with that woman, quote, being tossed around. But I don't think I really knew what that meant at that age. It wasn't really, I think all of us were probably a little bit too young to really understand the magnitude of what was going on or even why. And like looking back on it now, it kind of seems a little bit silly that he was impeached for having an affair
with that woman.
Yeah. Especially given everything that has happened since then, it's a bit wild to see how low the bar was.
Yeah, it
for
seems a little,
impeachment
not
back
to
then.
not to diminish the fact that it was obviously, it was not right for him to basically like use his position of power to entice somebody much younger and that did not have as much power than him into engaging in sexual acts. But it just kind of feels like a petty crime in comparison to the only other impeachment trial we've ever had to experience in our lifetime.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Given all of this, and it sounds like everybody had at least some frame of reference that this was going on at the time, I just wanted to ask y'all, what was our experience like watching this, knowing that this was probably the first major scandal that we remember happening in our lifetimes? What was it like to see that dramatized?
It's been very exciting for me. I watch it with a grain of salt, knowing some things may be embellished for television.
Mm-hmm.
So by the end of this, I will read the whole Wikipedia page to get the truth. But it's been exciting because maybe I should be embarrassed to admit this, but I still to this day, I haven't really looked into the details of the impeachment trial, the nitty gritty that this show is going to explore. This is like how with the OJ show, also under the American Crime Story banner, I was learning a lot for the first time because, again, I never looked into it. I never watched a documentary. This is all new to me.
It's not going to be shocking to y'all. I definitely, I was hyper aware of it as a child because my parents have just always been like very openly politically engaged. I will say I didn't know some of the nuances about the various trysts that occurred. So I didn't find out about, the blowjob in the Oval Office or the cigar incident until, I was of an appropriate age to know about those things. But I was definitely aware of it happening. And I actually remember amongst my friends, it was a topic of conversation. Usually people joked about it. There was usually some kind of joke associated with it. But I distinctly remember one of my friends, and it was very clear that they had gotten this from their mother, or father, who knows. But they were like determined. They were like, I don't think he did that. I don't think he would do that. And I remember sitting there thinking, well, how do you know that?
Yeah.
It's just funny to look back on it in retrospect. I remember my mom was super fucking pissed when this happened. She was like, why couldn't this son of a bitch just keep his hands to himself until he was out of office?
Yeah.
But he also we all know that Bill Clinton has this reputation too. Monica Lewinsky certainly was not the first.
As the first episode goes into.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. But speaking of Monica, I kind of wanted to take a moment to pep her up a little bit and say that I really admire her resiliency in the face of all that happened to her at a very young stage in her life. So after the events that this show is going to show over the next several weeks, she ended up taking on a $1 million Jenny Craig endorsement gig in 2000 to help pay off all her legal fees. But she ended up only earning $300,000 of that deal after Jenny Craig ended the campaign early in light of some of their franchises refusing to run the Lewinsky ads due to the controversial choice involved with making her the face of Jenny Craig. She also had a short-lived handbag line and later pursued her master's in psychology at the London School of Economics. She then disappeared from public life in 2006 for about a full decade. Nobody heard from her. And then between 2014 and 2017, she reemerged to take a stand against cyberbullying, calling herself patient zero of online harassment. And she is now a producer on American Crime Story Impeachment. So a lot
makes
of what
the show a lot more interesting.
It does make it a lot more interesting. And I've seen interviews with her where she talks about how involved she was in the writing process, in reviewing scripts, and in determining what sorts of things did get shown. There's a very famous story that came out of the Clinton-Lewinsky affair that I won't go into because no spoilers, just in case people don't know. But it was considered very scandalous at the time. And apparently they had initially left that out of the script. And she said that when she saw that it was not in there, she was flattered that they wanted to protect her in that way, but she thought it was really important that it be included. So she's really taken a front seat on, like, she's really taken the driver's seat on reclaiming this narrative and trying to use it for a positive, right? Promoting campaigns against bullying and cyberbullying. She had a great TED talk on the power of shame and what it was like for her to go through all of this. We have to remember she was like 23 years old when this all happened. So
I do have one complaint about the show too far, and it's a technical complaint. The show seems very grainy to me and dark visually. It doesn't seem bright and sharp. I don't know. Maybe it's just my TV or my recording of it. It's almost like they want it to look like it was shot in the 90s.
Maybe.
That's what I thought, maybe.
Okay.
That they had done it on purpose. Like, they didn't shoot it on film, though, did they?
I doubt it.
Because it kind of looks like, it has kind of like that feel.
Right, yeah. I don't know if that was a good choice. It's almost frustrating to watch visually. It's like my eyes are almost straining to look at it.
It doesn't help that the palette is very, like, drab. There's a lot of just, like, grays and blacks and neutral tones, so.
Right, they're in these dark White House offices. It's a little
But you have to remember, it takes place in the 90s, and corporate wear was not something that was exactly vibrant or attention grabbing at the time.
It's just visually, it's like they forgot to add some lights to all these scenes. That's all I mean.
No,
like
I think that's fair.
About a year ago, I started watching The West Wing, and I didn't make it far at all because it's like, it started in the 90s, the early 2000s. It's like hard. It's like everything's dark. And it was just too frustrating and low res for me to watch, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I genuinely feel like you're missing out.
I know.
Maybe they'll remaster it one day and you'll be able to revisit it.
Maybe.
You know what I will say? I would recommend, because I love Sarah Paulson, and this is making me love her even more. Go look at some pictures of Linda Tripp. See if you can find video of her. Her portrayal is spot on to the point where
that's interesting.
Eerie.
Yeah. Well, the makeup is
eerie.
Really good. Like, she's unrecognizable.
Yeah. Mark was watching with me and he was like, wait, who's that? And I was like, oh, that's Linda Tripp. And he was like, no, but who's playing her? And I was like, oh, that's Sarah Paulson. And he was like, oh my God, she's a fucking chameleon.
Usually you can tell when it's when it's a fat suit or some kind of prosthetic, but it's seamless.
They did a really, really good job.
They did a really good job.
Speaking of media dramatizations that are produced about things that we either remember or things that we know very well happened within our lifetimes, I wanted to talk about the idea on a larger scale. And if we ever think that there are certain topics that are being revisited too soon for our liking, obviously 9/11 is a big example, super relevant since that anniversary just passed. But I remember it felt like 5 years after 9/11 happened, there was like 5 or 6 different 9/11 movies coming out. Do y'all remember that?
Oh yeah. The Flight 93 movie? Is that it? I mean, I just did a quick Google. There was one that came out in 2006. That was only 5 years after 9/11. There were a bunch.
The one that I remember the most is, it's just called World Trade Center. It came out in 2006, starring Nicolas Cage.
That's right. Nicolas Cage was
I don't know why my brother and I used to, like, that was probably in the phase where we would basically just watch anything that came into the theaters because we lived next to a theater that had really cheap tickets. And I remember that we went And we thought it would, I don't know, we didn't think it would be fine. We knew what we were signing up for, but it was just like, it was too much, even though we were completely like, geographically removed from what had been going on. And there were multiple times where we almost walked out of the theater because it was just too soon. And especially when you think about, I know we've talked about this in relation to Laura's and my favorite topic, Selena. But when you think about how long it used to take to greenlight movies and for them to go into production and for them to get made, like they must have started production on this at least 3 years before.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like September 12th, 2001. They were like,
right, exactly.
Ink those deals.
We gotta dramatize this and put it on
What
the
if
big
this was
screen.
a movie? Yeah.
Well, and there was also a dramatization of the attack on Benghazi, on the embassies in Benghazi. And
Ugh.
that was within, I think, single digit years of when that attack happened. Remember, John Krasinski starred in it. We also have things like Vice, which actually came out within just the last couple of years about Dick Cheney. W, which was about George W. Bush, which came out very quickly after his presidency. Hotel Rwanda, which is about the Rwandan genocide in the 90s. Bombshell, about the Roger Ailes controversies at Fox News. So just thinking of all these examples, it kind of feels a little bit like revisit overload sometimes to me. Sometimes it feels like the consequences have not totally played out before these projects are greenlit.
Definitely. I think it just all depends on the story. We just got to take it case by case basis. 9/11, I would wait 10 years. 5 years? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Bombshell, I think that was okay that came sooner rather than later. But this is also a reminder of just how desperate Hollywood gets for ideas. They just can't wait. They don't have a queue of ideas they need to get to. They just dive into these because they think they're going to do well since it's a hot topic, a big story. There was also that show on Showtime called The Comey Rule, and it was about FBI Director James Comey and President Trump during the first months of the Trump presidency. That already came out last September, a year ago. I mean, Trump was still in office. Like, and who wants to watch that? I sure don't. We get Trump every day.
This is very low stakes in comparison to some of the other examples we've been giving. But even like the recent situation with GameStop, they were greenlighting a movie on that the next week after it
that's
happened.
so true.
Right. Yep.
And it's just kind of wild to see, like at some point, you have to step back and think about how it's not even like an event anymore. It's an opportunity. And but seeing these things as opportunities, especially when it comes at the expense of people losing their lives, is really ugly. It leaves you with a sour taste in your mouth, right? Just think about how Hollywood is looking to make a quick buck on something that people are fascinated by, no matter how gruesome or how terrible.
I kind of wanted to ask you guys, what current events could we see being dramatized, be it in movies or TV, over the next 10 to 20 years? And first, I have to ask, when are we all going to be ready for the COVID dramatization? Do we think it's going to be a movie?
It's already happening.
Or a miniseries? It's already happening?
Yeah, people are using I mean, like, there's so many movies that are centered around pandemics that have clearly been inspired by COVID, but nothing that's like too close to real life. But there are at least like 2 projects that are already out.
Yeah, I think in the case of COVID, like, nobody obviously enjoys this experience that we've been going through for the past year and a half now. So who wants to continue living it on television? You go to television to escape. Can we see movies or TV shows about COVID at some point? Yeah, like I would maybe see one in like 10 years after it's long in the past. But I don't want to see something in the next few years, especially because we know for sure at this point that COVID is going to be around for the foreseeable future. So that said, I think like Grey's Anatomy is already implementing COVID storylines. I actually kind of expected to see more masks on television, on film, and work COVID into the plot of all kinds of movies and television shows, but that hasn't happened yet. So I guess that's good.
Yeah, there was a lot of that going on with basically all the medical dramas, which there are a few on air. And then I know that This Is Us also had quite a few scenes with masks on to kind of like remind people that they, like, the characters were also in the pandemic and struggling with that. A very easy way to get your cast back as well and start shooting right away.
Yeah. And something about that, I guess, feels a little different to me. Like when I'm watching a, cable show, there is that expectation, unless otherwise specified, that these people are living in your same time. So a lot of what's going on in the world that's affecting you is also affecting them. And I can see how for viewers, it would create a little bit of comfort, maybe, to be like, oh yeah, like these characters that I love, they're going through this too, so I'm not alone. But I guess what I'm really dreading is the, bombastic disaster COVID film that I feel like we're inevitably going to get.
Yeah.
Also, the Trump presidency, I feel like it's only a matter of time before we get a movie.
Honestly, I don't mind seeing something like that, because so long as he's out of office, it's okay by me.
Yeah.
If he's like running for president again, I don't want to see that. Then you can watch and laugh. It won't be favorable towards the Trump administration.
No.
Whatever movie happens.
But haven't we had enough trauma?
Yeah, but this is now for entertainment purposes. Like, oh man, look at this administration. Don't they suck? I know it.
I mean, if it were, I guess, positioned as a dramedy, I could see that.
Dramedy.
I could see them maybe working, but I have a feeling, knowing Hollywood, it's going to be very bleak and very serious. And I'm like, nah, I remember all that. I don't need that again.
Yeah, I understand.
What about some of the social movements that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, like Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement? When do we think we're going to start seeing major productions? I know that some TV has certainly mentioned these items.
I wouldn't be surprised if soon, honestly. I mean, like, even just looking at the Black Lives Matter movement, Fruitvale came out not long after Oscar Grant. And also, it's rooted in fiction, but Angie Thomas's book, The Hate You Give, was also picked up and greenlit into a movie even before the book hit shelves. So
I didn't know
that's
that.
already out. And they've already greenlit her second book as well, which also kind of has some racial undertones in it as well, I believe. But don't quote me on that.
In terms of other historical dramatizations that we're looking forward to, The Crown.
Yeah, me too.
The Crown showing Princess Diana's car crash. Obviously, that's not a good event, but I was expecting it in the most recent season of The Crown that already aired. But that's the first thing that jumps to my mind in terms of other dramatizations that we can expect in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's also something that I vividly remember from childhood. Like, do we all remember when Princess Diana died? Like, very
I remember
vividly.
watching that on TV.
So shocking.
Yeah.
So shocking.
Yeah, I was having a sleepover at the time. And of course, I was a kid, so I didn't understand. But my mom came in and made us turn off the movie we were watching so that she could turn on the news. And I was so pissed at the time. But then later, when I recognized the significance of it, it was, of course, very sad. And didn't The Crown also get greenlit for an additional season?
Yes. So it'll be 6 seasons total.
Okay, so that means we have 2 left?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. They need to add another season, especially after that Oprah interview.
Yeah, so I was going to say, are we going to get to see the Harry and Meghan part of the story?
Maybe only on Lifetime, where they have the unauthorized autobiography of Harry and Meghan's love story.
I saw that in my Hulu recommendations the other day. And at first I was kind of thrown off because I was just scrolling really quickly and I saw the picture. And of course they're done up to look like Harry and Meghan. And I was like, wait, they released the interview to Lifetime. And then I went back over to it and I was like, oh no, that's not, those are actors. Okay.
You're like, why does Harry look really off?
I know. I was like, that really does not look like either of them.
I feel like right now might be a good time to make my recommendation because it kind of ties into this. I wanted to recommend Come From Away, which just debuted on Apple TV Plus. It's a Tony Award winning musical, and it is actually inspired by 9/11, but it's inspired by the flights that had to land in a small island off of Newfoundland called Gander. It's super uplifting. So if you need something to just kind of be a bit of a palate cleanser from this past week specifically, I would recommend reading up on that and checking it out if it's of interest to you. But I really enjoyed it a lot.
All right, y'all, we're taking a quick break to hear from our second sponsor of the week, Talkspace. Has anyone else been feeling a little overwhelmed lately? I know I definitely have, and it can make it really hard to know where to turn. We all talk to our friends when we're experiencing problems, but they may not always have the unbiased feedback and advice we need. That's where Talkspace comes in. We all need help sometimes, and asking for support when you need it is actually a sign of strength. The Talkspace app makes it so easy to connect with a licensed therapist via unlimited messages or live video sessions, all from the comfort of your personal device. I know this resonates with many of you at home who are on the go, whether working from home or commuting to an office. And Talkspace offers individual and couples therapy in addition to medication prescription services. I've used Talkspace before, and I love being able to message my therapist if I want to share either a win or a challenge about my day, so I don't have to keep a running mental list of everything I want to talk about at a session later. Start feeling better with a single message. Match with a licensed therapist when you go to Talkspace.com and get $100 off your first month with promo code MILL. That's $100 off when you use code MILL at Talkspace.com.
All right, so now we are joined by one of our baes, Chloe. Hi, Chloe. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. So we've actually known each other for a long time. You are currently a director at a digital agency in Los Angeles who works with celebrities. And when you filled out the Bay co-host form, you said, let's talk pop culture and what you do. And it's also a perfect week because, like I mentioned at the top of the show, parasocial relationships have moved into the spotlight again. And you probably know a good amount about that. Can you explain what you do, what this work that you do looks like?
Yeah, so at a high level, the team that I manage and work with, we partner with individual celebrities to help them manage their social media in a way that achieves their goals. And those goals vary a little bit from person to person, but the main one is usually grow their numbers, grow their following. But then it also usually goes into promote things that they're a part of. So that's not only, let's say, their movies or TV shows, but if they own a brand or are associated with the brand, if they're associated with any charities or any causes, things like that, will help them to support through their social. Those are a few examples. And the way that we do that looks so different from person to person and depending on what's going on. But we help them to create content and to post it a lot of the time and to strategize around bigger moments. So if you see celebrities doing things like an Instagram story takeover from a press outlet or going live or things like that, those are the types of things we also can strategize around.
Cool. One question that I've always wondered, so it sounds like you're very helpful to celebrities. It's really easy to get in trouble online. Case in point, what Nicki Minaj tweeted earlier today. Do you rep Nicki Minaj? Can you comment?
No, thank God. If I did, I wouldn't be here right now. I would be in crisis mode.
Code red. We gotta, Nicki, please delete the tweets. So it's very easy to get in trouble online. And of course, it's up for debate sometimes if the trouble is warranted or not. Do you give celebrities a list of social media do's and don'ts when they're posting themselves?
Honestly, it would make my job so much easier if it was as simple as making a list. I think that, there are the obvious things that not to touch, like don't be racist and things like that. But we have dealt with some instances of brushes with cancel culture, and oftentimes it's maybe stemming from something in the person's real life or an interview that they gave versus a post on social, or if it is coming from social, it may start from something that you would not have expected. So I think I'll get into this a little bit later with some of the challenges for jobs in this field, but it can be very difficult to know like what might have a negative response. And I think it's mostly down to just taking the time to evaluate how something could be interpreted and running it by multiple people on the person's team if needed. So that might be a publicist, for example.
So if somebody is going through a bit of a crisis, do you guys kind of counsel them like, look, it's okay, this is going to blow over, here's what you do now?
Yes. And that's often also in partnership with the talent's larger team. And thankfully hasn't happened too often, but those are some of my least favorite times at my job because it's very stressful.
Yeah. And you got to like coordinate with a bunch of other people. It's a whole, it's fascinating kind of that it is a whole team, which like can be expected. But of course, we followers just like, oh, it's just them. It's just one person, you know. Meanwhile, there's a whole team of people behind the scenes debating every little part. No offense when I say this, but everything's so fake. Just like in Hollywood. Just like every other part of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Can you put a percentage on how many celebrities are personally involved in making their own posts versus how many celebs are fully managed by other people? Because it is something I think we all wonder.
You know, I can't really put a percentage on it. I would say unless there's a celebrity who just gives the impression of being very tech savvy, or often the ones who are younger because they're like us growing up on these platforms. So someone like Lil Nas X, I'm sure he has help to help optimize, but I have no doubt he's doing a lot of it himself. But if they don't really fall in that category, they've probably got some level of help. But I wouldn't frame it as necessarily being fake. I think that even for the clients that we work with, where they may not know their logins, they may never touch their account, they are still involved, because I think the thing is, like you said, Andrew, the perception is that there's not a team. The perception is that it's that person. So social media can have real consequences, whether it's something good for them that goes viral or something bad for them, like getting canceled. So they are still a part of the process. They're signing off on things and they're, giving their own ideas. So it's just different layers of what that involvement looks like.
Do you all like slip in little typos if you feel like that's what the person would do? Because I wonder about this sometimes with certain people that I follow that are in the spotlight.
Yes.
That's so funny.
I was an English major and I am a stickler for grammar and things like that. So I'm not so much about the intentional typos, but things like shortening the word YOU to the letter U, things like that. If that's the celebrity style, we'll do that.
That's
and
amazing.
It pains you to type that out, I bet.
It would pain me too. So I feel you.
That's funny. Laura and Pam, how do you feel about that? Like knowing celebrities aren't truly behind some of the stuff that you read. Like, does it bother you as somebody who is on social media a lot?
No, honestly, because I feel like if you think about it for 2 seconds and you think about how high profile and busy these people are, they have to have a team to manage their brand. They have to have a team to manage their publicity. Even people, and not that she's a celebrity, but like I think about AOC, for example, who's super active on Twitter and has this reputation as being very Twitter savvy. I don't doubt that she's heavily involved with that, but I also know she's very busy. So the likelihood that she manages that 100% on her own and there isn't a team behind some of that, I think is very low. And I don't see it as a negative thing.
Yeah, I would argue, and I know it's my job, so I'm a little biased here, but having that support makes the person a better follow. They're able to post more often. They're able to post higher quality content, things like the TikToks that have complicated editing, or they're able to engage with a trending meme. And when it's actually trending, it makes them more interesting to follow.
I think for me, and I'm sure that Andrew will agree, just because of the nature of the industry that we're in, it's just kind of something that you assume happens anyway. Every once in a while, I feel like I end up covering a lot of pilots, And every once in a while, I'll get in a room with somebody and I just think to myself, like, wow, like you have had no media training whatsoever. And it's really funny, but it is actually kind of sweet because like, I feel like, you know, that's probably the only time I'm ever going to get a version of that person that has not, you know, gone through extensive training with how to answer and like what to say and things like that. But yeah, it just like does not surprise me at all.
I guess one reason I'm asking this question is because I don't think I follow a ton of celebrities, but the ones that I do, I get the impression it's them writing out all these messages themselves. And so if I knew that any of these people weren't actually writing these, I would probably be pretty shocked by that. And you add on the fact that the nice thing about Twitter, at least at the beginning, was that it did feel like there weren't teams behind tweets and Facebook posts and Instagram posts. You know, there was that direct connection between the follower and the celebrity. And I think we are transitioning away from that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think the thing I've always liked about Twitter is it is a direct connection in so many cases.
I think where the disconnect for me happens is anybody that's not a celebrity in the traditional sense. So like a social media influencer, for example, or anybody that came up on YouTube or I guess now even TikTok, I would just assume that they're the ones that are handling all of their socials. But that's probably just, you know, a blind side on my part to assume that they don't have somebody that's helping them out.
Yeah. I think it's hard to say because with those influencers, they really have to be in the majority of their content. Whereas with traditional celebrities, there's so many things to pull from that are not live, especially if they have a long history of projects. There's so much content that does not require them to be creating new things and new videos all the time. So I would imagine a lot of the higher tier influencers have some support just because it is, you know, a full-time job to do all of this, but that they are very involved in the process.
One of our listeners who's listening live right now on our Patreon, Ashley, has a great question. What are your thoughts, Chloe, on Britney's Instagram? That's gotta be her, right?
Yes, I don't follow it super closely, but I feel like it is her, especially just from hearing, you know, you guys talk about it on the show. If she had a social team, I feel like she wouldn't be posting the types of things that she's posting.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot going on in her head, and it comes out on social media, I think. But how about like J.K. Rowling? A lot of that seems like her.
Yeah, I think that's her, especially because it's only on Twitter and it's not very often. It's more sporadic. I would believe that that's her actually like sitting there doing that. And I would also say whenever there's anything that goes up that's more personal, whether it's the talent sitting there posting themselves or not, like they've almost certainly cleared it. You know, it's not like me over here making up J.K. Rowling's views about TERFs and things like that.
Right. The only on Twitter thing is a great point because you, as a manager, want to get their messages on every platform.
Everywhere.
Yeah, you want those numbers. Whereas J.K. Rowling's like, I'm just sitting here on Twitter. I don't need this shit on Facebook and TikTok and everything else.
Would you say that people that are like only focusing on one platform are less likely to have a larger team behind them? Or is that sometimes just somebody's personal preference?
I think it's mostly down to preference. We've worked with people who are only on one or two. A lot of people have value problems with Facebook. There's a bit of a slippery slope there because Facebook and Instagram are obviously under the same ownership, but we've seen a lot of people move away from Facebook. Maybe people only like Instagram. I don't think we're really seeing people only on Twitter, but I feel like that's a platform where you could get by with less support. But if we're looking at Instagram, I think it doesn't really affect the likelihood of having a team because it's such a high lift to manage that platform.
What are the biggest challenges for digital managers in 2021? Because there's so much changing online on these platforms every day.
Yeah, I could talk a lot about this. And I think if people are not familiar with the space, if I tell them about my job, the response for a long time was like, what? So like Twitter? And, you know, there's just so much that goes into it. So I kind of broke out these challenges into two main things. And the first one would be that it is constantly changing. So not only new algorithms, which there's not a lot of transparency most of the time into what changes that might entail. So kind of playing detective to figure out what changed, what type of content should we be leaning into that's still going to get results, but also entirely new platforms, things like TikTok and Clubhouse now being very popular, and platforms that are important but then retire. So Snapchat, and then the shift from Snapchat to Instagram stories. So some of these, it's not too big of a deal to kind of add into your work repertoire. It's just a new way of doing something that already exists. So for example, if you're already doing TikTok, doing some Instagram reels, probably not that big of a lift, but then some add an entirely new dimension that you've never had to think about before. So Clubhouse, and now all of the clones of that, Twitter Spaces and whatnot, is entirely new. So just to illustrate this a little bit more, I started my job in 2015, so it'll be 6 years in November. And just to name a few of the things that have changed since my first day, when I started, Facebook Live and live on all platforms did not exist. I saw Snapchat become very, very popular and then very not popular, at least in the space of the talent that we work with. Instagram stories did not exist. And then, of course, TikTok and Clubhouse did not exist, those being more recent platforms. So it's changed a lot, even in, less than a decade.
Right. And all these features right now could suddenly drop in popularity at any moment. We can suddenly be over Instagram stories or Clubhouse. I think Clubhouse is already trending downward.
Exactly. And Twitter fleets, there and gone.
Twitter, at least they admitted that was a failure. They were like, we're just going to turn this off. Never mind about this.
Yeah. And then all of this kind of plays into the other thing, which I would say is a big, big challenge about working in social media in any capacity. You are really expected to be a jack of all trades. So knowing strategy and best practices across all platforms and features, including these new ones, which are constantly being introduced or being sunsetted, and knowing them quickly because you want to be an early adopter for your clients. You need to copywrite, and often in multiple different voices, and not only write copy, but concept posts and campaigns that have the potential to go viral. So you need to be, funny or clever or unique or whatever that might mean. You need to understand and engage with an audience, or often multiple unique audiences. You typically need to have some level of photo and video editing. You need to be reactive to trending news and memes, whether that means you need to hit pause on what you're doing to jump on something, or to address trending news, or go dark, depending on what the news is. There can be a level of crisis management, both from that and cancel culture, like we talked about earlier, which I have also found can be a big mental health challenge. You need to do data analysis and reporting. And then there's also just the typical business skills of team management, building and presenting pitches, and interfacing with clients. And as the landscape changes and more things are added, you're still expected to just continue to add those onto your plate. So it's really a role that could be split up into so many jobs in another industry, but you're expected to be an expert on all of them.
That is a lot. Do you expect that to change in the future, where maybe you won't have so many tasks to take on as social media matures?
I think probably not as a blanket for the industry. I know it is structured differently across different companies. So I think it's just a matter of kind of finding a situation where you're supported. So for example, on our team, there's not one person on a client. Typically there might be 2 or 3, so that you can get a little bit of a break or have support and divide and conquer. But I think it is a big problem with the industry, just this expectation, because the extension of that phrase, jack of all trades, is master of none. So at a certain point, if it continues to expand, where does the work take the hit?
Right. Yeah. So social media rose as we were all growing up. So I find it very interesting and exciting that you're in this field. We never could have dreamed of working in this field as a kid. When your parents said, what do you want to do when you grow up? You didn't say, social media manager, I want to work for Twitter. They would have been like, wait, what? What are you talking about? So how did you get involved in such a new career? And clearly you're deeply involved in it at this point and doing very well.
Yeah, thank you. So I honestly had a dream situation where I fell into my job. I I got into it through connections that I had from actually working on fan sites, which is where I kind of started doing like pro bono, I guess, volunteer work covering different fandoms and things like that. And I think that was part of the experience that helped me to get my job, because working with entertainment talent, you need to be able to know their whole world and understand their fans and also be a good writer. So those were really good foundational skills. But I did kind of fall into it that way shortly after I got out of college. I think growing up, I kind of had the intention to go into publishing. And then this is something that allowed me to stay on the West Coast, where I've always lived and where my family lives. But I think also, Andrew, even the conversation we were having and hashing it out about fandom, I was thinking more about it. And I feel like right around the time where I got into this career was when a lot of the fandoms that I was in that were based on books were being adapted. So I kind of followed that interest and got involved on more of the film and TV side.
Yeah, nice. Well, so let's talk about parasocial relationships, because I was seeing a lot of talk about these in the past week, particularly because of a story concerning John Mulaney, the comedian. Honestly, I don't think I heard this phrase prior to last week. And it's also, I was very seen because somebody was like, also, I feel like nobody heard this phrase until today. I was like, whoa, yep, that is me.
I agree.
Same.
No idea.
I do not, but I was really excited to have Chloe on because I've been looking for an excuse to bring this up on the air.
Yes. This part of the discussion was Pam's idea. Pam, what is a parasocial relationship?
So it sounds really fancy, but basically what it is just a one-sided psychological attachment to somebody that's in the public eye. And just to give a little bit of a background to this phrase, it was actually coined in 1956 by social scientists Donald Horton and R. Richard Wohl in response to the growing TV obsession in America. They described it as a, quote, allusion to a face-to-face relationship with performers. The interesting thing about parasocial relationships is that it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you are in a one-sided situation with a real person. Although I think today and age, that's kind of what is assumed when people bring this up. But it can happen with a fictional character, also politicians, and even before the term was coined in the 1950s, just like general public speakers as well.
Okay. Chloe, do you see this occurring in your line of work, parasocial relationships and some of the problems that come along with that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was not something that I had heard about either until this past week or so, but in kind of looking into it and thinking about it, the negative jumps to mind a bit more than the positive. So, I have seen some toxic fandom things and fans who believe with their whole hearts that they know better for talent than the person does. So things like, oh, the talent doesn't know that their significant other is not good for them, and it's my responsibility to tell them why, because I know them and I know what's best for their life.
It's disturbing. Yeah.
Yes. So I've seen that. And then even on the positive side, I think it's interesting to see how some of the things that we'll post for our clients become really a part of their brand and become really associated with them. So they'll be asked about them in interviews, or they become little like quirks, if you will, that the fandom kind of celebrates. And it's like, well, that kind of came from our brains, not theirs, but it becomes a part of their real brand.
Yeah. Kind of like a little inside joke.
Yeah, kind of.
Parasocial relationships don't have to be a bad thing, because that's what helps drive the success of a movie, of a television show. You feel deeply connected to the characters and the actors who are portraying them, and you want to support their work. I mean, I think we could argue we have parasocial relationships with our listeners, or the other way around, because they want to support us and see us thrive through Patreon, or just simply returning to the show every week.
Yeah. And I would also say what Pam mentioned about fictional characters. I thought of the phrase comfort characters that people have, where they feel so deeply about these characters in some form of pop culture that they, bring them like comfort and like a cozy feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
And I feel like too, I mean, I don't know that I would call it a parasocial relationship that goes quite so deep as some of these ones that get really negative, but there are definitely some creators that I follow and Mark also follows, and we talk about them sometimes just between
Right.
ourselves on like a first name basis, like we're actually friends or something. And so I'll be like, oh, did you see that thing Dre posted? Did you see that thing Ryan posted? And
oh my God, I love him.
Yeah. And it's like, we've never met them. We've never had any interactions with them. We just really like who they present themselves as, right? Like, who knows if that's the real deal, but I also don't spend a ton of time thinking about those people. So I can see how easily it can start becoming a slippery slope if somebody starts really becoming entrenched with that brand personality, and how easily their world can be rocked if it turns out that's not true.
I mean, like I mentioned with social media, it all does typically look pretty homegrown. It's a peek inside these people's lives. So you can't help but grow closer to them in a lot of cases. YouTubers especially, they're vlogging their everyday lives, with Instagram story too.
And I think that's why you're seeing this phrase pop up more and more, to the point where, as you both said, Andrew and Chloe, that you noticed it being tossed around even a few weeks ago, or a couple of weeks before we banked this show in particular. So
yeah, I want everybody to come clean about a parasocial relationship that they have, that they're experiencing. Laura kind of got into one. I will say, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but I know I'm not alone. I have a Peloton bike, and you can take live or pre-recorded classes with these instructors. There's like 20, 30. I feel like I definitely have a parasocial relationship with these people, because I feel like I've gotten closer to them. You spend a half hour to an hour with them, to, maybe daily, depending on how many times you work out every week. And they're all super fun, cool people. And they're talking directly to you. You're having a good time with them. You experience these moments with them, whether it's because of the music or the inspiring things that they're saying, or the things going on in their everyday lives that they're telling you about, that, you build a relationship out of that. There have been moments definitely where I feel like a pretty powerful connection. They're very good at coming up with inspiring things to talk about while you're going through a tough workout. And it's a break for a lot of us during our days when we work out with these Peloton instructors. So I definitely feel a relationship with them. There's one instructor, Emma Lovewell, like, she looks directly into the camera sometimes where you're going through a tough moment, and I like temporarily turn straight. Like, she's just like connecting with you, and I'm like so turned on in that moment. But even that aside, it's just, I build connections with these people.
Makes sense. And that's also kind of an intimate thing too. Like, not to put too fine a point on it, but
right.
I mean, these are people that are literally making your ass sweat. Like,
right. And again, looking directly into the camera, talking to you, talking about whatever they want. It's really great.
It's part of your life journey, right? I think in a way, a parasocial relationship we all have in common is Steve from Blue's Clues, who we just talked about.
Yeah.
What is it? The variety show of this last week. I think that you can consider that to be a bit of a parasocial relationship as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
He never forgot about us ever.
He did not. And look at how good it made us feel to hear that he never forgot about us. Like, does he know
Somebody
any of
loves
us? No, but we feel like he does. So.
Right.
And I
God, we're
think
going to find out
that's-
he's an anti-vaxxer at some point.
No, please don't say that.
But I think that's also an example, I think, for a lot of people, of a healthy parasocial relationship. I think sometimes when this topic comes up, we only tend to hear the negative side of it. And I'm sure, as Chloe alluded to, there is definitely a negative side to it. There can be. But I think that oftentimes you can form genuine relationships with people that make them feel good.
Chloe,
What do you think?
who's your
Yeah.
parasocial relationship with?
I mean, I feel like mine, I really relate to what Laura was just saying. I followed a lot of plus size fashion influencers over the past year, who have been such a benefit to like my mental health and body positivity, which are an ongoing thing that I struggle with. But from seeing glimpses into their life and sometimes, wearing literally the same outfits because they'll post a lot of cute things that I want to buy, there is such a feeling of closeness. And it's similar to, podcast hosts or even you guys. I'll have to remind myself like, oh yeah, they're not actually like my friend necessarily. Well, I'm going to say you guys are, but the influencers I don't know. And then on the celebrity side, I thought of somebody like Chrissy Teigen, who's very open and has shared the highs and lows of her life. It generates those same feelings of closeness.
Yeah. I feel like we have a genuinely intimate relationship with our listeners. Like, I've hung out with multiple listeners, including in the past year, who I'd never met before. And it's always a good time. I've also gotten good, I think, at hanging out with people who I haven't met before who are listeners, because I know they know me. So it's like, that's a starting point.
Take some of the pressure off.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I've done that too. And it's always been a really good time. I mean, that's actually how I met Jewel, our social media manager, in person. We got a group of millennial listeners together at the Wizarding World several years back, and we hung out and had beers and had a great time. I miss being able to do that. That's, I think, what's killing me the most about this pandemic is like, we could have all these opportunities to have, listener get-togethers, listener gatherings. We did one around the election a few years ago, and it was so much fun. I miss being able to do that.
It was so much fun until Trump started winning.
Yes. Until Florida flipped. And we were like,
But of course, we being with our listeners, and for I think all of them, it was their first time hanging out with us. We didn't want to be part of the reason why the night was ruined. So we had to keep up like an upbeat mood, like, ha, 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 so tell me more about your life, as we're watching Trump run away with the election. We were dying inside, but we tried not to show it.
Yeah. I went back to the hotel and bawled afterwards.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. But all right. So the lesson here is that there is a very fine line to not cross into when it comes to parasocial relationships. There are healthy ones, to be sure. We've just been speaking about many of them, but then there are some where people think they know the celebrity better than the celebrity knows themselves, and that's when it becomes a problem. Of course, there's stalking going on, all kinds of bad things. So, well, Chloe, this has been so great. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great having you on.
Thank you. It was so much fun.
Chloe, you will also be in After Dark today over on our Patreon. And by the way, that variety show about Steve that Pam mentioned is on our Patreon now as well. We were talking about that video on why it shook all of us so badly. In After Dark today, Laura's going to be providing a DoorDash related story. I can't wait to hear this. She says it's for the ages. So I'm going to grab some popcorn for that. And then we're going to talk about getting into popular shows or franchises way late. This is actually Chloe's idea. And we went onto our Patreon and we asked listeners if they got into any shows or films too late. A lot of people answered. I'm actually very pleasantly surprised. I wasn't expecting this many responses, but we will at least mention all of the contributions. So that'll be available at patreon.com/millennial. Okay, time for recommendations. I feel like there's a good chance at least one of you three has watched Lula Rich, this new documentary on Amazon Prime.
I haven't, but I'm going to now.
Okay.
Yeah,
because I
haven't
hate
yet.
these. Anyway.
Pam?
No, I haven't, but it's been sitting in my queue for a minute. So please tell us more about this documentary.
This is a new documentary on what's been going on at this multi-level marketing scheme. I think it just recently came out. It follows LuLaRoe, the rise and fall of LuLaRoe. It includes interviews with the founders. That's what makes it especially interesting. They did sit down for an interview, but it is noted at the end of the documentary they did not sit down for a second one, even though the documentary requested it. It also includes new interviews with many of the Burns people who were fashion consultants at LuLaRoe. It is really good. I have never really followed LuLaRoe very closely other than knowing that it was an MLM. it's a pyramid scheme, many will argue. And just hearing all these crazy stories about what goes on there and about how the whole family is involved with the business. And there's a lot of family members that are very questionable and absolutely should not have been involved in running the business. Very fascinating 4-part docuseries on Amazon right now. Though it has to be noted that this documentary is on Amazon, another company that's very well known for screwing over its employees. That frustrates me, but it's very good.
Yeah, actually, I remember LuLaRoe Vice did a mini documentary on them a few years ago.
Okay.
And watching that just infuriated me because I remember having so many friends for a while who were LuLaRoe consultants, and they were trying to sell me these ugly ass leggings. No offense to anyone who liked the leggings. It's fine. But yeah, I'm going to have to check this out because I have a real hate for LuLaRoe. They screwed a lot of people over.
You will love it. So much drama. I was screaming at a couple points. Please check it out.
I'm so excited. What I'm going to recommend is a game, Life is Strange 2. I know this has been out for a while. I just got around to starting to play it last night. And if you played the original Life is Strange, this one has definitely benefited from getting more funding than the first one. So the graphics are definitely a step up from before, but it still maintains the same spirit and the same vibe as the first game. And if you like choose your own adventure type games where you're presented with multiple choices that can have different outcomes for your game, then this is a really good game. It's a little bit sad, so I would say bear that in mind, but it's really beautiful and I'm enjoying it a lot so far.
Chloe, what's your rec?
So I'm really excited about the Great British Baking Show coming back for new episodes in a few weeks. And my recommendation is something that I think could help fill that last little bit of the void. So it's a show called The Repair Shop, which is on Netflix, and I think originally from the BBC. And it has very similar cozy vibes and same type of music as Great British Baking Show. But the setting is a workshop where people will bring something that has meaning to them, such as maybe furniture or a clock or pottery or a painting that's often been in their family for decades, if not a century, and needs to be repaired. And there are a variety of craftspeople at the repair shop who handle that. And the stories get very emotional. I'm not somebody who cries like watching things, but I've teared up a few times at some of the reveals. And just the fixes they're able to do are unbelievable. So you might have a vase that's broken into 100 pieces or a painting with like a golf ball sized hole in it. And by the time they're done, it looks like it was never broken at all. So it's a really interesting watch and very similar feelings to Great British Baking Show. I think it would be a great one to help us get through the last few weeks before new season.
That's great. Good rec. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. It's been a great show. Couple of reminders. Make sure you're following us for free in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, especially if you're in Apple Podcasts, please do leave us a review. We would appreciate that. Speaking of following, we are Millennial Show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And by the way, Chloe, I'm sure our social media manager, Joel, will be loving hearing everything that you have to say today since she works in the field as well.
Yes. Hey, Joel.
And finally, do contact us by writing directly to millennialshow@gmail.com or by using the contact form or anonymous confessional on millennialshow.com. If you have any feedback about the episode, we love hearing from you. And of course, we love that you listen. So thank you. That's all for today's episode. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
I'm Pamela.
And I'm Chloe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.